Now you'll see that I'm joined by a distinguished group of leaders to deepen the dialogue of today and to discuss the question at the very heart of our gathering. What rules need changing in companies to make gender equality a reality? Plenty to discuss on this topic, of course. Here to do just that are Annabella Basler. She's CFO at the publishing powerhouse Ringier, and Andreas Berger, CEO of Swiss Re Corporate Solutions and the board member of Advance, as is Florence Schniederich, currently Vice President there and Head of Private Banking at Zürcher Kantonalbank, ZKB, and Roman Iselin, Vice President for the Europe, Middle East and Africa supply chain of medical devices at the health industry giant Johnson & Johnson, who we've just met in the break. So all of you have brought a game changer card here. I'll hand this out and you'll take your own card out, please. And you will present to us the card first, and we'll discuss the issues highlighted there as well as possible solutions. Now, as we are all about changing the rules here, I will not go with the usual ladies first. I will instead start with the gentleman. So please, Andreas, please tell us what's on your card.
So I can read the issue today, the problem statement. Bias can get in the way to support women to access opportunities or promotions. So that's the reality that we are confronted with every day. And the new rule that I wanted to introduce is break the bias, obviously. Now, there's a little technique, a very simple technique that I would suggest. So in your mind, swap one person for another person and ask yourself if you would feel and respond the same way. For instance, if you have a woman that you interview and you have a man, just swap the roles. Just ask the same question and see how the woman would respond and how a man would respond. Very often we have preconceived ideas about how a man's career would look like or how a woman's career would look like and what capabilities they would bring to the job. So that swapping the roles, I think, helped me at least in my job.
It's a simple idea, yet very effective. So can you give us an example? What kind of bias or biases even, because we all carry more than one, did you have to overcome?
Yeah. I'm in an industry that is built on expertise. So a big excuse that was used to fill the roles was that certain people had to have long-standing expertise, technical expertise in a given job. So if the male had longer tenures in the company or in this area of expertise, naturally you would say this person would be better qualified for the role. The woman had different qualifications. And we saw that in specific change situation, transformation situations, actually those qualifications of the woman that were not built on long-standing experience in a given job, but had more diverse experiences and capabilities in new fields like data, for instance, or also the creativity aspects that were more inclined to be successful in a change environment. So that could help.
Is that something that you noticed as well? I'm asking the two women on my panel, maybe?
I think it's very important when you have judgments. Another example would be when you do interviews and you have case studies with both female and male candidates. It's very important to change the role and to think of yourself on how you would judge, because you are a woman, you judge a woman differently maybe than a male would judge a male, because we often have a tendency to look for the mini-me in recruiting. That's a big danger. So to overcome that, I like his approach to say you turn off the bias and you consciously make an effort to think of it differently. And
nothing
especially
worse than being surrounded by mini-me's.
Exactly.
I mean, where are you going to get there? Okay, so next up would be Annabella's card, please.
Well, the issue today is that 82% of all media is about men, so 18% left over for women. And additionally, if women speak up, they are frequently interrupted more often than men. And so what does it mean for the new role? Everyone deserves to have an equal voice and to be equally heard and treated. Media, and we all, should make a conscious effort to give visibility to female professionals more often. Because my impression is that female role models are an inspiration for all women.
Indeed, and I understand at Ringe you have this initiative going on that is really taking a hard look at that, right?
Yes. We have implemented Equal Voice 2 years ago, and we use data and tech in order to measure how often women or men are being shown in media. So this algorithm helps us to quantify exactly this factor. And it's not only in the text, but as well in the pictures that are chosen.
So you measure it all?
Exactly.
Okay, that's good, because I actually looked at the numbers that you published in January. And I saw that after an initial boost in 2019, when it was launched, that now it is, the numbers are somewhat, lagging or maybe decreasing in some areas. Does that mean that Equal Voice has lost a bit of its momentum?
No, not at all. Handelszeitung, when we started, were at 17%, and we are now at 32%. So we are really proud about the achievement. Mm-hmm. And in our eyes, it's not only the pure factor, but as well the frame is really important. So what do we mean by the frame? It's actually what you were stating. It's like about, would you address the same question to a woman than you are to a man? So if you interview a female CEO, do you have different questions in your mind, whereas you are interviewing the male CEO? So this is about the frame, or what picture would you choose when you want to cover a female CEO versus a male CEO? So it's really interesting that our journalists, they set themselves the goals in order to measure this equal voice factor and the equal voice frame.
I wonder, Roman, just as a media consumer now, do you notice these discrepancies, that there's female voices missing? Because sometimes, I'm speaking from experience, you have whole sections where only men are talking and just the news that we're accustomed to.
While you ask me now privately, right, as a consumer, I would say if I'm sensitive, if I'm aware of it, I figure it out. But if I'm not sensitive to the topic, or I have a bias, then probably not. But if I'm conscious about it, then I would probably say yes. But it really starts that I'm sensitive to the topic. I have a personal awareness on the topic, I would say.
It starts with the awareness, and we have a similar project at Swiss Broadcasting where we try to have 50-50 in our expert roles. But I'll tell you a little story. I do a lot of explainers, online explain videos. I wanted to do one about the pandemic and the history of pandemics, in fact. And I said, no way, I'm going to have two men explain this. I had a man within a couple of hours. And then I said, okay, I just need a woman, fine. And it took me way longer because I think 3 or 4 women declined. They were virologists, epidemiologists, and all kinds of experts that just didn't want to participate. And it took a while. And that means that maybe, of course, cost is involved because it took longer to actually come up with the product. And you have to risk that as well, right? To say, okay, we commit to this, and even if it costs more time and money.
You're totally right. We use an expert list. We have created a female expert list. So we are gathering all our female network in order to give more easily access to the journalists, to those great women.
But is it true that women sometimes are a little more hesitant when it comes to this kind of like public exposure?
Well, I think...
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's our role as well, when as we have initiated Equal Voice, to find solutions for it. So we offer workshops in order to facilitate the interviews with journalists, that they are trained in order to know what could be like difficult questions or how to answer if the journalist wants to put you on the wall.
No, put you on the spot, yeah. We tend to do that sometimes. But not in a mean way. Okay, so next up, it's Florence's card, please.
So I say the issue is that female managers are often stuck in support roles. They are in service roles, roles in the background, in the second line, and not so much in the forefront in positions of power. And what I would define as a new rule in corporate world, and what I personally really try to work at actively with my team, is that companies need to manage the female pipeline to ensure that the talented women get into the right roles. Because a lot of women I speak to, they're very happy to stay head of support or head of services or head of products or, servicing background roles. And they don't realize, and that goes back to your point of visibility, they don't realize that if you have the right role, you're also more visible, you can achieve more, but you can also have much more impact and you can change the world. And they're happy to do that in the background. And I challenge them, the women, but also the managers who nominate people into those roles.
But managing the pipeline, it's easier said than done, right? Because, that involves changing the mindset of management itself, but also of people who should be in that pipeline. How do you
have to take both approaches. You have to work with the women to make sure that they are more courageous. They don't step back when there's an opportunity to speak up, but they take the risk and they push for themselves. So you need to help them to get more self-confident and step out of their comfort zone. But you also need to work with the managers and the leaders that they take more risks in nominating women who maybe when you call them the first time, they say no. You call them the second time, they say no. And you call them a third time and you try to convince them, maybe using another way in, taking another woman, manager, leader, to talk to them in a different way.
Just like when I was looking for my interview partners, I just have to ask them a couple of times. Do the others maybe have similar experiences, that it's difficult to motivate women to leave those support roles?
I think yes and no. I think you will find the very hesitant one. But on the other hand, you will find also women who say, look, I'll raise my hand. But then still, the step is quite difficult. And I think you gotta, as a leader, you gotta create the space and the safe environment for them to excel. So I think this is very important. Have the back, that's always the sentence we say, you have my back. So they feel comfortable, because it can be quite rough out there in the space amongst managers. I always say it's wildlife out there. Yeah? And you have to help each other. Help a colleague to be strong. And it's not only for the male networks that exist, it's also for the females in a given position, definitely.
Is that also where mentoring programs come in?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think coaching is very important. You can't just nominate someone into a new role in a male environment, which we are talking about in banking very often, and not help them. You need to guide them through, mentor them, coach them, give them support. Yeah.
Or buddies.
Yeah.
Buddy program.
Well, you're both in the financial industry. How is it with the health industry? Because you're in a field where a lot of the consumer decisions are taken by women.
Yeah, but it has the same importance for us, because, in the moment of the decision, it's already kind of often too late. So building the pipeline is a long process, which, as you state, mentoring, sponsorship, of preparing the candidate, of preparing and supporting the females in their development. So they are ready for the pipeline, but then also ready for the role. That's really a commitment from a leadership standpoint, which is very important that we drive that. But that commitment comes with time, it comes with effort. And I think that's important to take that journey. So also for our industry, which I would say life science has a little bit different arms. So it might be a little bit different in each one of these arms, but overall, overarching, it's the same topic than in the finance industry, where we need to give more focus. But again, it's not an overnight shot. It's really this commitment of driving that continuously forward.
Driving it continuously forward, that's something that your card is actually also about, how to do that, right?
Yeah, really? Well, let's see.
Well, I noticed I was referring to the new rule there. You'll see.
All right. So my card, the issue is stating companies and leaders have a wide sphere of influence, which they do not use enough today to push for gender equality. And the new rule I'm proposing, that diversity should be one of the conditions in the choice of suppliers. So talking about that we as company have a large influence in society and how we use that influence in our decision making. In this case, specifically on supply, on where we get our supply and what are the criteria on how we supply, that we include diversity criteria in the decision making. That's what I'm proposing.
So what are the diversity criteria that must be met if I want to be a supplier for J&J?
Well, we work, that's a global standard we are working, which might vary a little bit then by a region and local, but certain factors which are globally in there, it's, for example, women-owned business, or another diversity factor is small, mid-size companies. So there's a variety of factors which are combining the whole scorecard of the supplier, of the procurement decision-making process.
And that is a process that is for the long haul. That's why I was referring to the long view that you have to take when choosing suppliers, because you have business relationships that last for quite a while.
If you refer to this, absolutely. Also, this is a process, but a process where you need to have clear guidelines and clear criteria in order also here to move and to make a difference over time, yes.
But it's based mainly on self-reporting, right?
On what is it, pardon?
On self-reporting.
No, these are criteria which are included in the decision-making and in the procurement process. So
but
that's
the suppliers, it's what they say, because you might run into the risk that you have just some purple washing and then people put out nice papers and say how diverse they want to be and that they have all these plans, but do they really meet them?
Well, you can obviously always argue. I mean, we follow global organization standards. We do audits, but there's obviously always a certain risk that as you call it, blue washing is happening. But
purple washing.
Purple washing,
yeah.
Excuse me.
We got a lot: green washing, blue washing, purple washing.
Washing, but
got
again,
my colors right.
You know, I think it's also our obligation to have a good exchange with our suppliers, so we also really know on what they work and do regular audits of them.
Okay, that's important. So right now, I would like to do a little reality check, because I looked at the executive boards of all of your companies, and that is quite a good and a fitting picture what the business world looks like today in Switzerland. So Annabella, I start with you. 5 out of 7 members on the executive board at Ringier, they are men. Mm-hmm. So that's not exactly an equal voice, is it?
Well, we have 2 women, so for the last year, but for the last 10 years I was by myself, you know. So okay. I think we have already an improvement, you know. Mm-hmm. So I love to measure improvements.
But I mean, is there a goal? At Ringier, did I say, okay, we want to reach a certain amount, and maybe come to 3 or even 4 out of 7?
You know, I think gender is one criteria of diversity. There are different diversity criteria as well. That's true. And I think as far we haven't set any diversity rules on top management level, but we are constantly discussing how we can include the diversity from different angles.
Roman, I wonder if J&J Switzerland would actually qualify as a supplier for J&J if you would look at just purely the management, because there's 12 people and only 2 are women.
I mean, we have a subgroup of many companies here in Switzerland, so it's not so easy to answer that question. I would say, look, so first of all, it starts with measuring the data. If you don't know what you don't know, it's kind of hard to drive the change. And for us, a few years ago, it was really important to get data, that we measure diversity. Diversity, as you stated, with different factors of diversity, but that we know on where we are on the journey and that we can drive a development. Now, definitely there's room for improvement overall. But I think we have been coming quite a way last few years, but we also have clear commitments, but also ambitions to drive it to the next level.
Now, Florence, you know what's next. I looked at ZKB, of course, and you are, in fact, the only woman on the executive board of ZKB. And before that, I understand that the rule was to have men rule, right?
It was no one, yes. I'm the first in
You were the first
150
one.
years, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of that, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Personally, but not for the company.
No.
So we are changing that, yes.
You are changing it, but I also saw you'll get a new CEO after 15 years now in September, and it will be again a man.
That's right. That was not my choice. No,
Of course.
he's a very great CEO, and I'm sure he will have diversity high up on his agenda, for sure. When you look at the company where he works at the moment, where he comes from, and you look at the management team, there's a very diverse picture. But banking is tough, yeah. We have 25% of leadership in female hands. And that's not good enough, especially in our bank. We are mainly, the leaders, the female leaders are mainly at lower management levels. So it is my personal plan to help them to develop into higher ranks. And there's a high attention on the topic right now. So there will be a second colleague. I won't be alone for 10 years like you, I hope.
Okay.
There will be a second one coming. But also it's important the levels below. I've set targets for my own organization below to have a certain number of women, not only in management roles, but also in roles of client advising, because that's also very male-dominated in banking.
Male-dominated in banking, as is the insurance industry. Andreas, at Swiss Re, there's 2 out of 13 people on the executive committee that are women, and you're a board member of Advance. So what do you do in your everyday life in order to change that?
Oh, look, it has to start, at grassroots level. So we have given ourselves targets, clear targets for each group executive committee member. We have promotion ratios that we want to achieve. We hire people on diversity criteria. We look that the panels who interview are diverse. So this is something that has to start from the bottom, because we need to fill the pipeline, the succession pipeline, as you already heard from my colleagues here. I think you have to walk the talk. That's it. Yeah. So, and you have to be serious. At the moment, through all leadership bands, we have an aspiration for this year of 36% females. The aspiration then for the next level is 40%. And we will measure this. Yeah. So when we look, if there's a male promotion, has there been a diverse panel at least, or did we miss something? So that's an active conversation. Don't forget to talk about it continuously. It's an iterative process, and by talking about it the whole time, you remind yourself as well. So that's important. And again, gender is just one criteria. We have many other criteria here, but Advance, we're talking about gender equality. So that's why we focus on this in this discussion here.
Is there maybe also a difference between the public companies and the family companies like Ringier?
Well, yeah, you definitely can say when you're a public company, the pressure from the public is bigger than in a family-owned company. But I do believe at Ringier we take the responsibility in all the topics as seriously as if we were listed.
What do you think?
I think one difference that there is more between very traditional Swiss companies versus international companies. That's what I noticed.
What do you mean? Oh, that's elaborate on that, please.
I noticed a difference in if you have a mixed group of employees. I mean, internationally speaking, there's no secret. Switzerland is quite behind the curve. So if you have the Swiss society, culturally, we are not there like other countries are with female leadership roles, but also with women in the workforce, represented at good jobs in the workforce. In Switzerland, 6 out of 10 women work part-time. And in our company, we are obviously very Swiss-German, because you need to understand Zürich to work for us. So we don't have access to international women who migrate into Switzerland and who are well educated. And we have 50% of our women who work part-time, 30% of them work less than 75%. So it's, 30% work more than 75%. So we have a very small group of people, because that's a clear criteria, as studies show, to advance in the career game, to be promoted, to get better jobs, you need to work a certain ratio. And I think that's part of the Swiss system. Swiss women are very used to, culturally, working part-time, because the responsibility for families lies more with women than with men. And in other cultures, other countries, that's just not the same. When I worked internationally, I saw in other countries it's totally standard. You have children, you work. You continue to work 100%. In Switzerland, the reflex immediately is the woman at home, the mother, reduces part-time, and you get less promoted.
The reflex and the incentives.
And the
sometimes
incentives,
the financial
yes.
incentives.
We could do a whole talk about just that, I guess. But the consequence of that system and that culture is that we have less women in the pipeline simply by that fact that so many work low levels of part-time that they take themselves out of the game. And that's a mainly Swiss issue and not so much an international issue.
I'm hearing that we have a question that pertains to this. As we see in the Gender Intelligence report that just came out, a lot of the problems with women climbing the career ladder start when women reduce their working hours due to motherhood. What new rules can companies put in place to prevent this?
So what we do now, we start with raising awareness. I talk to a lot of women in the company and I mention to them what is the consequence of your part-time, and especially if you do it for a long period of time, if you stay part-time. So just show facts and figures. And it's not just about the career, it's also about your pension fund, it's about your financial independence, it's about a lot of things in the long run that are impacted by that. So we need to raise awareness, and we're starting a study with University of Zurich where we are focusing on that also with our women who fall pregnant, to raise awareness that the decision at the birth of the first child is so key in how much you go back to work. You can measure the difference, 10 years later, a man after the first child, a father, and a woman, a mother after their first child, 10 years later, the differences are massive. Yeah. In Switzerland, around 40% of less pay. That means less pension fund, less social security, less independence. It has a whole lot of consequences.
There's a long tail, so to speak.
We need to talk about that. We need to address it individually, but also to women as a group.
But additionally, I think it's we have to be aware that fixing the system could help as well, because we at Ringier, everybody can reduce hours, but we want to do it this way, that two women or two persons that have reduced can share one management position. So this is about fixing the system, not only fixing the women, but like fixing the system in order to give this opportunity that you can have shared jobs in a management position.
That's a good approach that companies can take. At Johnson & Johnson, do you also, as soon as you know that one of your employees is pregnant, is there a talk and like, okay, this is what the career is going to look like?
Yeah, I think overall we engage very early in this conversation. And as I think, come back to the question, it's about also setting up and allowing and promoting new models, like you just mentioned, right? Also in leadership roles, part-time. Or I remember last year I had my HR partners, they were sharing the role. I think also that these are models we need to accept and promote. And another program we have been now, I think the last 2 years or so, making really good experience was with Reignite. That we brought women which were for some time out of the job market for different reasons, collaborating with universities and other organizations to bring them into leading roles or just in different roles, but to give, using different instruments to allow that. I think that would be for me the changing the rule, that we give the space and foster this culture in the organization that gives the opportunity to develop also once your mother or whatever the circumstances are.
Otherwise, you're losing valuable talent, of course. And we have a card that was created within our app, and it says that the issue today is that men are not aware of the fact that gender equality is a good thing for them as well. So gender equality is not only about the women, it's also about the men, equality, of course. And the new rule that's proposed is that internal communication actively campaigns the advantages of gender equality for men. And this one already has more than 30 likes. So, but internal communication, that's something that usually when you have a problem, you say, okay, we just need to communicate better. Is it really done with that? Or is there more to it, to say, okay, it's not only communication, but make men aware of that is mainly what they're confronted with when they decide about their career?
It's a good start already,
yes.
The communication. But as I said before, you need to walk the talk. I think it's up to each and every one, and we call it leadership from every seat. Each and every one needs to contribute. We have, for instance, encouraged paternity leaves, and we saw that the take-up rate was 50%. We were surprised, so it was actually quite good, but it's actually not enough. Yeah? So
but that was voluntary, right? You could,
yes.
or could not take it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you have to continuously start to promote it, to talk about it, etc. I'm not always a big supporter of big campaigns where you put names as sponsors, etc., into it, and then it doesn't cascade through the organization. So you really have to go into the teams. You have to talk about it. You have to invite people to talk about it. That's part of internal communication. So it's not just campaigning through the intranet, etc. So walk the talk. Yeah.
But it's really crucial, because otherwise, if you have men that feel disadvantaged, you end up with sort of a backlash, right?
Absolutely. That's a serious issue. We hear very often that males got frustrated. And I think stats help a lot. Yeah? So the facts and the stats help a lot, but it's still an emotion. So address the emotions, encourage them, and promote good examples, yeah? So that they see suddenly the benefits of diversity. And nobody would deny the benefits of diversity, but unfortunately it's becoming very personal. A personal career opportunity is maybe prolonged, delayed in a personal perception. But if I look at our numbers, also our promotion ratios, we can't say that male don't have any opportunities anymore. So if I go back just a couple of years maybe, we still had more males that were promoted, even though we were already talking about female promotion. So the reality didn't reflect actually what we wanted to achieve. So if you then increase the efforts, then suddenly, the ratios got better. And the noise levels at some point will also reduce, the criticism, etc. Yeah? So, but that's a fact. Yeah, it exists.
I agree. It's a totally emotional topic, and it's incredibly important to talk about facts and figures. Because when I arrived as the first woman in that role, immediately I got the reaction from many male talents that they now know they have no chance anymore, that they worry about not getting ahead.
Oh, really?
Because obviously I'm going to promote women, knowing that I'm already in advanced board and I have been talking about female promotion. But when you see the stats, every time we have new promotions, every time we have new positions in a reorganization that we position newly some teams, you have to show them what the ratios are. And sorry to say, but the majority, even though I put high attention on the topic, the majority is still very often male, because we take a lot of time to bring up all the talents to the highest level. So I say, as long as at the top I'm one, and as long as at the level below we are only 10%, there's a long way to go until women are really at an advantage. Because we always take the best candidate, and if 2 out of 4 we take female candidates, that's still not really changing much of the
It's changing
ratio.
it very slowly, and we're back to the pipeline problem that you alluded to on your card. There's another question. How do we shift this from fixing women to male accountability? What male ally programs are any of your companies investing in?
Male allies, I think.
Allies?
We have a good one in Zürcher Kantonalbank. We ask our male and female leaders, but because we have a majority of male leaders, they are more concerned. We ask them to put up their seat for 1 month of testing for young ladies, young female talents, to sit in their seat and take over 1 month. We call it the driving seat, and it has 2 advantages. It does show those male leaders that there is a young, talented woman who can actually do a lot on their seat. So it gives the lady visibility, but it also makes the male leaders learn that there is more to their role than just how they do it. But it can bring a diversity in that seat can bring another approach, raise new questions, have a different result.
So men as allies then, okay?
Yeah, they will be an ally in future of that lady, of that young woman who sat in that seat. They will almost become, like you said before, sponsorship is really important. They will become a sponsor of that woman if she does a good job and leaves a good impression in that 1 month. They will become a sponsor in the company when there are new jobs available to help promote that woman.
But the role of the men is important, right? Otherwise, it won't work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's critically important. And I say, for me, a lot is also with the experiences we are generating, right? With good experiences, that generates more momentum. But I think we, as males or as male leader, definitely have a huge responsibility to drive that momentum. And it takes some extra efforts to drive that. And sponsorship, at least in my experience, is one of the most powerful one to really, let's say, to drive the change we like to see.
We do have another card ready that came from our game. It says that bias that mothers cannot be good leaders as their focus shifts to family. Okay, just let's talk about the issue first. Is that true? Their focus shifts to family and they kind of neglect the business side?
I mean, the Gender Intelligence Report gave us some very interesting stats. That there was a gap between the age of 31 and 40 where the females actually disappear from the scenery because they stay at home, they're mothers, and that is sort of the social agreement also in those families. And I think that's something that we need to address. This is economic potential, really, that is sitting there, and we're not making use of it. And I think this is very critical for a national economy. Very, very, very critical. So that's
basically sitting idle and not being used.
Yeah.
So the new rule proposed is to introduce measures that help families to equally distribute family work for both partners. That's a icy topic, the family work. How you work? Is there anything you can do about that? I mean, it's also up to the families how to divide that, right?
I think there is this great couple. I think both are professionals at Harvard, and they made, when they met, and when they were dating, they made this contract that they would always support each other in their career. Even if one wants to give up the career due to family reason, they would push themselves. And I really love this idea that you can have like this contract with your partner in regards to career, but as well in regards to family tasks.
Okay, so that it's a sort of an agreement beforehand.
Exactly.
Okay, that's one way to do it. What do you think about the rule?
I would say we as companies and leaders have a responsibility to generate an environment which allows that. And with the environment, I mean, on how we look at work times, like flexible working models. Childcare could be another topic. So do we generate and foster a culture, but also the environment which allows for, as it states here, that the couple can choose on how they want to build their lifestyle. I think that's where we have the accountability to generate this culture and environment.
What we are trying to do as well is bring visibility to men who work part-time. We have a lot more in the younger generations who are now taking a day off for their children. So they work 80%, and we're bringing that up and making it visible. It's very important that it also becomes socially accepted, that men, fathers also reduce. That's one thing. And the other thing is, even if you don't reduce your time, you're a working dad, you may still want to also bring your kids to the daycare. So I've introduced the rule that we do no general meetings, important must-attend meetings before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. Because if you start meetings at 7:30 or at 8, you can't bring your kids to childcare. So it's a very important message. And there were teams who said, but we don't need that. We're all fine coming in at 8. I said, no, but you don't know. Someone may not dare to say that one dad also likes to go once a week to daycare or pick up their children. So you have frameworks that you can influence in a company to ensure that dads help their wives in childcare.
Or just provide the space so that the people, as you said, can make their own decisions and are not boxed in by the circumstances.
I think maybe to that point, it's also important that we take inspiration from good examples, even outside our world of influence. I was born in Rwanda, so half Rwandese, so I grew up there. And one wouldn't think of a country like Rwanda of being diverse in gender, for instance. So this is the country with the highest amount of females in parliament and government. And also in companies, you find a lot of CEO women. And the question is really, how do they manage their lives? Yeah, because they're mothers, they have a household, etc. And not everybody has people working in their households for them. Yeah? So they seem to manage it somehow. So let's go out and see how are others doing it.
It's very simple. Most countries don't rely on the mother only. In Switzerland, we are really a lot relying on the mother, and many other countries. I worked in Hong Kong for 2 years. I've never seen so many female bankers who were managing directors because they don't feel like they have to take care of their children. It's a family or a helper or different ways of doing it. But I think in Switzerland, it's a bit of cultural influence that we have, that we are not quickly enough getting rid of.
We're not known to be quick internationally. That's certainly a given. But you watching us, you can be quick, very quick in voting for your favorite cards. You'll find all the cards that are presented on the panel in the app, and you find cards that were created by other participants. And there's only a little time left, so make sure you get your favorites in front there, because the 4 aces of business, those will be the ones who will win the prizes. Now, speaking of cards, I would like to reshuffle our card deck a little and make sure you have not only your own card to comment on, but somebody else's card. So maybe if Roman could get Annabella's card and vice versa, and you also could swap. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see if it's right. I'm never sure. Even in poker, I'm not sure if everyone has the right cards. But otherwise, you just bluff, okay? That will work in poker. So, Roman, you got Annabella's card?
Yes, that's right.
So it's about making female voices heard and making women visible. What could J&J do to ensure this, that the company is also seen, that the female side of the company is seen in public?
I mean, there's lots of things. What comes in my mind is it's definitely on one side giving the stage, internally, externally, in terms of communication, in terms of testimonies, in terms of success stories, just promoting actively the stage to females so they can share their story. So that's definitely an important thing. The other thing, I think we touched already a bit before, it's also the data of that we also measure on what we are doing. We're not always so strong in that. I think we as Johnson & Johnson have really put quite some efforts in the recent years to measure much more what we do. And I think that's important, that it also gets out of emotions, that we have data. And the data helps then also to drive better decisions on where we need to have which spokeswoman, spokesman. I think these would be elements which come in my mind.
And I think you also provide the data instruments for that, right?
Exactly. We offer Equal Voice as a service in order to ensure that women become more visible, definitely.
And there's the equal voice factor, but there's also another one that measures quality and kind
exactly.
of how they are portrayed.
Exactly.
How does that work?
This is the Equal Voice frame. And it's like the example that we had, what questions are addressed for women or for men, what picture is shown. And this is really helpful because it triggers a different discussion. It's not only the quantitative part, but as well the qualitative part. And it's so important that we were talking about culture and we were talking about rationalization of this emotional discussion. And this is actually what we experienced in our newsroom, that the rather emotional discussion became totally rationalized because of the data. Nowadays, you just can raise your hand and you just can say it's not equal voice. And then everybody will try to find a solution how to make it equal voice. So it's interesting.
No, gives you new approaches. Now, with Roman's card that you have in hand, he highlighted the power that companies have with their supply chain. And Ringe is an international company. You have businesses in Eastern Europe, you have businesses in Asia and Africa. So how could you vet all these kind of different companies if you want to vet them for diversity? You're confronted with various different kind of standards depending on the world region you're operating in.
I love this new rule so much because it shows the leadership approach. Because I do believe diversity and inclusion is something, it's a leadership topic. It's nothing to delegate to HR. And this element shows the possibility to quantify it. And that's why it becomes rationalized. And me as a CFO, I love just numbers and facts, you know. So I think showing at Ringier we have 135 companies in 19 countries. So we want to walk the talk and show that diversity inclusion is a leadership topic that should be lived. And I think at Ringier we have a good approach to it. We look at the diversity and inclusion strategy from a really, really easy point of view, because I do believe easier it is to implement it. So keep it short and simple. And we look at how do we want to define this diversity, how do we hire, retention and promotion in order to get there. And the measures to do so, we do it in workshops. We ask all employees to join us in order to define those measures. And then we build a roadmap. And then we want to implement it step by step, because I do believe as well it's a marathon and it needs to take baby steps to get there.
That's internally, but when it comes to the supply chain, do you have any criteria? Because it could be very difficult depending on which area of the world you're operating in.
Definitely. No, we are not as far that we look at the supply chain. I'm so happy that we are looking internally as well externally in our publications. So don't exaggerate, you know.
Oh, well, it's a progressive event, you know. We get ideas from Johnson & Johnson, and then Ringier starts looking at it, and vice versa. That's what we're here for. So, Andreas, you have Florence's card, right? She talked about the expert trap, so to speak, that women find themselves in. And I could imagine that at Swiss Re, it could be very comfortable as an expert. The insurance industry has plenty of jobs, that well-paying jobs, where you do not have management responsibilities. So what would you tell those employees in order to get them interested in management roles?
Just get involved. We have also some managers who have shown courage to take unconventional decisions around placement of people into jobs. And I mean, I can only quote one example in my life. When I was in my previous life in my other company, I was responsible, amongst others, for the African continent. And South Africa was known as a country that had to overcome apartheid. And so they had, obviously, the quota system. And I had the courage in those moments to say, I'll choose a first female black CEO for an insurance company in that country. So if you flip this over to our world here, we have now for the first time chosen a female for a role for all risk engineers, so head of risk engineering, which is very technical. All the engineers, a majority male, first time a woman, and this area is thriving. It's fantastic. Good results, employee engagement results are fantastic. So it is possible. So let's continue doing that.
So the fresh approach that really kicks things off. Florence, Andreas suggested to swap the person in your mind when you interview them. And I wonder if you interview next time you're looking for a private banker, how would you swap this person in order to appreciate different kind of backgrounds as well?
I think it takes more than just that. I think it's a very good idea to swap, but as I said before, you also need a system around. You need facts and figures, and you need a process around this, trying to swap yourself personally. You need a process around. So the step I have started to take is to take a diverse recruiting team and to have a specific set of cases and studies, case studies, presentations that candidates need to do to be able to observe them in real time on real cases in an interview. So it becomes more, how shall we say, more neutral, the observations, and it's not just dependent on someone's personal convictions.
Absolutely. So we have a final special card that we want to discuss before we need to end this here. And the issue today is that inequality in pay, well, the issue is inequality in pay for men versus women. That's a big one, of course. And the new rule could be to make salaries or the salary ranges and titles public, so just to publicize them in job ads everywhere, and don't make current salary visible to HR. So that's interesting. What do you think about that?
I mean, I can say this is a big topic in our industry, by the way, internationally. So the London market, which is very important in our industry, was the front runner by making it transparent and then also setting clear rules. We have seen a gap in the relative pay, gender pay gap. But that's obvious because there are so many male, much more male in leadership roles historically. But if you look at the adjusted pay gap, when you take one for one the comparable roles, etc., we came a super long way. So we don't see systematically any disadvantage anymore if you are a female. So that gap disappeared, which is good news. And I think we need to promote that even more, even internally in our company. This is happening as we speak. So this is gone.
I actually think women are looking at the wrong numbers. We are talking a lot about equal pay in Switzerland, but that's not the main problem because equal jobs get paid very equally. On the right, what you say, we have a very close statistic. If we look at all the numbers, men and women in the same roles are paid the same. Our problem is that women are not in the right roles to be really paid well. If I take the top 100 people in my entity that are paid the most, I go far to find the women because they're not in the highest paid jobs. And that's what we need to raise with women, that they choose the right roles with impact, with responsibility, with visibility, where they also get paid, that can pay for their childcare and can pay for their helper at home, and all of that goes with it, and their pension as well.
And then we'll reach a much more equal world. Thanks a lot. This will have to be it.